Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Heel Report, which is a part of Tar Heel 24/7, which is also a part of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports. I'm Tar Heel 24/7 publisher Andrew Jones. He is Tar Heel 24/7 staff writer Noah Weisskopf. We were both at the Keenan Football Center Monday for Bill Belichick's press conference, by far the most anticipated press conference since his initial one, more so than the one that started fall camp back at the beginning of August. So this was it. This was one of those moments in time that when you look back on a regime, however long the regime lasts, 1 year or 10 years, this was an opportunity for Bill Belichick to fix a lot of the chess pieces. And I'm going to throw out a question to people watching and listening who have seen the presser. I advise that you go watch it. Do you think he fixed those? And then Noah and I are going to discuss that and just kind of carry on an organic conversation about this. And by the way, if you're watching this on Monday, remember at midnight tonight, our flash sale ends at 60% off. You get a 1-year subscription to Tar Heel 24/7. If you had it in the last week, you would have known what's accurate based on what we reported, and you would have known what's not, because we debunked some of the national stories that were floating around. So anyway, Noah, did he move enough chess pieces Monday? Did he not move enough chess pieces Monday?
I'm right in the middle, man. Like, I think I think his theme could have and should have been a little bit different, right? Like, I think the theme that he had today was that they're going to keep doing what they've been doing and they're going to continue improving. Now, based on what we've seen so far, right? The 120 outscored 120 to 33 in Power 4 play, all those different things. I think that his theme could have been a little different. I think that if he would have approached today's or Monday's press conference as, look, like, we know we're not where we want to be. We know we haven't seen the results. We know we need to improve a lot, and we're going to be changing some things. Now, okay, you say, if he says that, we're going to ask him, well, what are those things that you're changing? So that would have been something that he needed to know before, needed to know going in, which obviously he didn't approach it in that way. But I think the message would have came off a lot better if he approached it in the, we know we are not where we want to be. I think that's the first thing. He didn't really hint at that. He hinted at and said that the results are not what we want them to be. Of course, right? They want to win games. But from an on-field product, they're nowhere close to where they want to be. There's no way. Because of what's happened, because of the stats, because they rank almost dead last in most categories or right there close to it among Power 4 teams. I wish there was a little bit more assertiveness from him, emphasizing the fact that they need to improve in a big way, and we really just didn't see that.
I'm going to agree with you 100% on that. And I think that was sort of how he handled the stuff that came out last week from what we reported, WRAL, IC, The Athletic, national stuff. He did refute. The only specific he mentioned of the reports was the thing that Ollie dude reported last week. And it took us 45 minutes. I was in my car when that came out. I go home, I make some text, and I go on the board, and I refuted that right away. And that was all BS. Ollie's the same dude that said there was a 400-page Bible. Never occurred. So my advice to I don't know who he is. He might be a connected journalist. I don't know. But when it comes to Bill Belichick in North Carolina, he's 0 for 2 there. So that's for starters. But he didn't get into any specifics of anything else. What I'm sensing from you and what I sense from him is that if there was ever a time for Bill Belichick to show a little vitality, a little anger, today was it. Damn it, we're not playing like we should. And it's our job as coaches to get these guys to play better. We made some progress. Working on fundamentals. And you know what? You guys are full of crap. How many of you called us to try to confirm stuff? Of course, we run stuff by the program. Program ignored us after a while. I'll say that. There were some very simple things, like the Hulu thing. They wouldn't confirm the Hulu thing to us. And as of right now, that could still be up in the air. So the program wasn't really in the disposition to work with anybody anyway, but still it should be. The spokesman for the program should be reaching out and talking, saying, okay, what are you hearing? What is going on? We could confirm this. We can't confirm that. Even if they BS'd us and said we can't confirm anything, that doesn't mean it wasn't being confirmed otherwise, because everything that we reported was confirmed. But there was no anger. There was no vitality behind, guys, we've been awful. We got to get a lot better because we got no more bye weeks. 7 games left, and 6 of them, they're going to be massive underdogs. And they'll probably still be an underdog to Stanford at home. The other thing is all this stuff being said about the program is destroying the program. And it's not being reported with the intent to destroy like way too many people think. The first comment on YouTube from the Belichick press conference is, fake news, lies, propaganda. No, it's not. No, it's not. There are a lot of things that we know we've been told that we just haven't gotten that third confirmation on, so we can't report. But it's bad, and it's getting worse. And the flow of information from sources has not stopped. He had an opportunity today to draw a line in the sand. I do think a line was drawn, but not a super deep one. You know, there's that guy that, like the parent that says, well, you got to have your room clean by 4 o'clock if you're going to go out to play. Well, the room's not clean. The parent then says, okay, 4:30. Next thing you know, it's 6:30 and the kid still hasn't cleaned the room and the kid's out playing. And the parent keeps drawing a new line in the sand. I do think that in the case of today, there should have been more of a line in the sand, a deeper line in the sand. This should have been a line of demarcation for the program, for Belichick and the program. We're going to fix this on the field, whether it's this year or next year, it's going to get fixed. And this other stuff is crap. We're going to find out who some of the leakers are. And you know what? We have had some stuff that we need to fix there as well. We're learning how to run a college football program. Stuff happens. We're going to be better moving forward. That pledge wasn't there. It was very benign, and I do think that it was sort of 50-50, but it was a very, very lukewarm 50-50.
And what better time to make that, be assertive in that way than when you have the chancellor watching you, when you have both athletic directors watching you, when you have Mike Lombardi watching you. I mean, there was a lot of power in that room. If those guys all are in agreement on one thing, it's probably going to happen. There's a lot of power in that room. And I think the biggest theme today was not what he said, it's what he didn't say. You gave him the opportunity right at the end to deny anything that's out there, other than the fact that we denied, like we've talked about earlier, we denied the buyout thing. We denied that on our boards. We were the first to do that. The case is it's really a matter of what he didn't say. You asked him, is there anything you want to refute? Is there anything that you don't agree with? I guess necessarily is not your exact wording, but is there anything that's out there that you want to deny? And he kind of giggled at first, which was a little odd. He laughed, right? Like a little laugh.
He did.
And didn't have an answer. Said, you're doing your job, I'm doing my job. Which one could insinuate that everything's accurate, that he's saying, well, you guys are doing your job. One can insinuate he just didn't want to talk about it and he's just trying to get away from it. Regardless of which way you think, he's not refuting anything. He's not saying, actually, he knows what we're reporting. He knows. He knows what everyone's saying.
Everything, QT.
He knows. And if he would have pointed at you and said, actually, one of the things you reported is incorrect, he would have done it. He didn't do it. Everything that we've reported, we are not just brushing under the rug now. It's all factual. It's all still true, regardless of what statement, what 12 or 13 word statement they put out. Everything that we put out is true. So I think the biggest theme was that he didn't refute anything. It was what he didn't say. That was the biggest thing.
I agree. He had opportunities. And maybe he just didn't want to go there because he didn't want to continue that part of the discussion.
Right.
So to give him the benefit of the doubt here, we can go down that path for a moment. I think his mission was deny, dismiss, be calm, be in control, which he was, and let's talk football. Because every chance he had to talk about football, he said we got better last week. Well, they said they got better before Clemson. And my new favorite word, mollywop, Clemson mollywopped him. This is a Noah Weisskopf word, mollywop. Point to the passer on that one. He went ahead and said it today. And this is where the danger is. If they get mollywopped in Berkeley, we have to ask him, and he has to answer at some point, you would think, what is the improvements you saw that you didn't see on the field again? Or could it have been 50-6, but it's only 40-6, so there's the improvement? We don't know because he's not really going to go there with us. He doesn't offer any of those specifics. And while maybe a lot of people watching and listening say, yeah, the media doesn't deserve that, but the fans do. And what are we? We're the liaisons to the fans. That's why I would like to see a little bit more forthright, a little bit more vitality, because the fans need it. The fans want it. There's a ton of people say, I'm not going. I'm sick of this crap. 5 weeks in, this is a load of you know what. I get that. I get them feeling that way. For us, we have to cover the full scope of it. They're going to play another game. We're going to cover that game like we covered the TCU game. We're going to approach all of it the same, ready to crank out what we got to crank out. And what do? We report and say what they do on the field and what they say about it. Which leads me to my first question. I asked the first question in the press conference was, why did you make the statement Wednesday night? And I chose to ask that question because I wanted to see if he would pull up anything like what he wants to offer us.
Yep.
Clearly, you make a statement, not because things are well. If everything was complete and total BS, there'd be no need for a statement. The statement would be, it's all BS. But that's not what the statement was. It was a 12-word statement that was as vanilla as could possibly be. And Bubba Cunningham's 13-word statement was the same thing. It was basically a Band-Aid on a massive open wound. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think that the 12 or 13 word statement is really telling. And again, like I go back to the fact that, and I think that, so there was a question asked, I can't remember exactly who or when it was, but they brought up the fact that the locker room divide and the fact that this is a real thing. And his first words out of his mouth were not, this locker room is not divided, which you would think if the locker room was intact, that would be the response of a head coach, right? Yeah. That was not his first reaction. I think the first thing he said was something to the effect of, we're going to continue and everyone's working hard and this and that. That was not what the question was. The question wasn't, are your guys not working hard in practice? The question was about a locker room divide, which is a much more serious thing. And eventually in the response, he said something to the effect of perspective, and it just depends on the perspective, something along those lines.
Yeah, so it's them.
Yeah, I mean,
it's them, and like I don't see a divided locker room, so whatever. Yeah, that's troubling. It's very troubling, and I think most people would have wanted to see him come out and say, "Okay, this is BS, this is BS, and this is BS, and here's why." But that's not who he is, and he's not going to become that guy now. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of it. I think this warranted an opportunity for him to be a little different. He's been, until the UCF, a lot of the Boston media will tell you he'd been different with us than he was up there. So this was another opportunity, and maybe he just doesn't fully grasp how personal this stuff is to fans. I'm a pro sports fan. My team is back here. It's the only team I root for. It's personal for me, but I don't lose a ton of sleep over them. Now, if they ever win a World Series, I'll be a sobbing mess. I can guarantee that. In fact, I told my wife and daughter, I said, if they ever play Game 7 World Series, I want to be alone. I don't want you within 100 miles of me. You know what I mean? I get that. But for college fans, passionate college fans who are part of the process of supporting the program, like every time they buy gear, they donate money to the Rams Club. They're trying to help their program win too. They're speaking with their wallet and their emotion. They will lose sleep. I've been related to them. They will lose sleep over stuff. And that's why it's important to kind of use us sometimes to communicate to them. Because what would we say in this podcast if we came out and categorically denied other things when he was given multiple opportunities, and I put one on a silver platter for him right at the end? He could have stopped and said, you know what? This, and this. They didn't do it. He just laughed it off. And I think that that's troubling. Now, let's go positive here. Because in my column, I said he didn't win or lose. I gave him a 68 PFF grade to have fun with. I've been doing the PFF fun stuff lately, right? Adam Smith loves it, I think, when I do the PFF stuff. But I gave him a 68 PFF for the press conference because I don't think he lost it. We're being critical right now. Now we're going to hit on some positive stuff. Yeah. Where I think he did well is I think damage control is important. And he didn't say anything that made people think, my God, there's a new canal we can go down and dredge up all kinds of more crap. He didn't do that. He didn't stick his foot in his mouth. He didn't fan the flame. He didn't keep it going. He really tried to make it about football. And I think he did. And our approach moving forward this week is it's about football. They better be a better product on the field at Cal, because I'm going to be in Berkeley. And now I'm finding out there's a lot more Carolina media that's going out there. There's like 6 or 7 writers that are going to be there. So we're going to have plenty of opportunities for questions after the game. And if they don't play well, it goes back to what I said 5 or 6 minutes ago. What did you see that improved that didn't show up here? Again, because he keeps talking about where we're getting better, we're getting back to the basics, we're working hard, all that kind of stuff. Well, there's got to be a end result of it. So I do think in that he made me think more about football. Tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm writing a lot of football stuff. I'm not going to write about this other crap. We're going to do some podcasts about football stuff. You and Rankin did one about football stuff. This needs to be about football. We all are happier if it's about football. But as much as I think he turned it in that direction a little bit, there's that other balancing act. But I want you to be positive here for a moment about what I just said. And do you think he did enough to make it about football?
I think he did. And I don't know exactly what you were thinking. We didn't really talk about it going in, what our expectations were, what he would say versus what he wouldn't say. But you look at the reason that a lot of people and a lot of donors and people were excited that he's coming to Chapel Hill is because why? Because he's been so successful at the NFL level, because he's such a legend, because he's so experienced. He's bringing all these experiences to Chapel Hill. Well, he's been in these situations before. This wasn't new to him. I can promise you that he wasn't walking in there super nervous and didn't know what to say. He was ready for this. He's so experienced. He's done this before. He was never going to come out and say something that was going to ruin himself or ruin the program. He's done this countless times before. He spoke to the media. I can only imagine. I want to know how many press conferences he has been in. That number must be baffling. He's done this before. He's so experienced. And so he was never going to say anything that was going to ruin himself, ruin the program, put a player down, anything like that. He said the only thing that really he could say. This was the baseline. Everything he said, looking back at it, we should have guessed before that this is exactly what he would say, the fundamentals, those kinds of things that he's been telling us from day one. He's not all of a sudden one day going to change because reports came out and because he decided to put out a 12-word statement. Everything was going to be the same regardless.
But they have changed as a program some. For example, my phone was blowing up with their tweets about Drake May on Sunday.
That's right. Big change.
And we got that one confirmed too, that about what happened there. Also, we get the coordinators on Wednesday. You covered Ohio State last year. You covered their championship run. You get coordinators all the time. Even some of the biggest jerkhead coaches out there are going to give you the coordinators. We haven't had the coordinators since August 7th. Suddenly we get the coordinators.
I didn't even.
And we also got a couple players who were very well spoken, very political, very diplomatic, and they spoke for the locker room. They know what they're doing. They're doing some calculated stuff while Bill is just Bill. No frills Bill, right? I thought he was calm and professional. I thought he was a legend standing up there. He looked like a legend to me. He looked like a legend who is Teflon. Yeah. He worked through some other serious crap, and he dealt with Boston media. Boston media is going to approach things a little different than us, but he didn't deal with college media. College media maybe goes about things a little different than pro media. I've covered pro sports too, and I covered that differently than I cover college because the need, the desire, the thirst by the fan base is different. But I do think that we do see evidence that they are acknowledging that there was some stuff, and they're trying to control that a little bit. I thought that he tried to control the narrative some today. And it's interesting, our joke behind the scenes is, well, it's getting back to the basics and fundamentals, because that's what he says all the time. So that's sort of the joke about Carolina football right now, in a fun way, not in a demeaning way. And that's what he was today. He was back to the basics, and he was very fundamental. And again, the one report he cited is a guy that lives like 12,000 miles away. He's not going to be in that room. He didn't cite any of the reports made by anybody in that room. So he knows what he's doing. He calculated enough.
Yeah.
And very baseline. And that's what we got.
And of course, the guy that lives all those miles away gets 11 million views on his tweet, whatever it was, like crazy stuff, right? And then we're there behind the scenes putting these things on our site and different things. And I will say too, to go off of the player interviews, I thought that, there wasn't a ton there. We didn't expect to get a ton from those kinds of guys, very veteran leaders who are experienced in talking to the media, not as experienced as Belichick, of course. But and by no means were we out to get them or anything like that. But I think it was fascinating that both of them had the opportunity to address a reported locker room fight, right? And neither of them, like we talked about with Belichick, neither of them said that's BS. Neither of them said there was never a locker room fight. Neither of them were assertive in that sense. Yeah. So I'm not going to go out there and tell everyone that there was 1,000% a locker room fight, but use some context clues there. If there wasn't a locker room fight,
we know things. Some things can't be fully confirmed. We're not going to sit here and say there wasn't.
Right.
We're not going to sit here and say there is not a divided locker room. We're not going to sit here and say there aren't a lot of players that are thinking about their next move. Okay. And all those things are out there. And I think what you're saying is spot on. Those are the right guys to have there. Andrew Simpson and Christo Kelly can run for office in 15 years and win elections.
Yep.
Right. And that's one of the reasons they were up there today talking to us. And I thought they did a phenomenal job. And now Belichick may not have been nervous, but I would imagine those two were. Yes. They didn't know what they were getting into. They were in there for his press conference.
They were
at the back of the room. So they saw they heard the questioning. And if you're a novice to the media in that environment, that was probably a pretty intense 25 minutes, I would think. And they did very well. So kudos to them for doing a great job. Kudos to them for representing the program exactly as they were asked to do. But to your point, a lot of things were not refuted. And if they do march forward and get pummeled and get pummeled and get pummeled, and more stuff starts to come out, they can't recreate today's press conference, which is why I think it would have been wise for them to refute. Because are they going to refute then in 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 7 weeks, whatever the case may be, if there is another moment like this? They can't recreate. This was their one opportunity to really take the upper hand on the story. And while I don't think that they hurt themselves, I don't think that they really helped themselves either.
Which is why your column was spot on, right? Like they didn't win and they also didn't lose. And again, like you said, I thought they did a very good job, the players. They didn't say anything that they shouldn't have. It was evident. I imagine the program went to them and said, would you guys be willing to do this? Props to them for saying yes. I imagine they said yes and wanted to be those leaders of the veteran leaders of the team. And the program definitely had them ready, right? They weren't going to put out these guys even though they're veterans, without having some direction or having some talking to. And you mentioned they were in the room for that. Some media relations guys from North Carolina were talking with them while Belichick was going. And while one player was going, some media relations guys were talking with them for the other. So again, I think that they, like you said, did a great job. But again, I think the story of the whole day was that the fact it wasn't what they said, it was what they didn't say. I think really that was the fact of the day, with both Belichick and with both of the players, with things that are going on.
In baseball, tie goes to the runner. In this press conference, tie goes to neither. I think a can gets kicked down the road, and we'll see what happens. I believe that if they turn things around on the field, a lot of this is going to go away for a while.
Of course.
If they don't turn things around on the field, that's going to be the biggest story. Because in the end, he was brought in to win games.
Yep.
They're forking over truckloads of cash not to rebuild, as Michael Lombardi foolishly wrote in that email. Because that wasn't the pitch. All those money people that he wrote the email to, that wasn't the pitch initially. They weren't brought in, they weren't given all this cash to rebuild. And what's fascinating, and I'll close with this, and I want your response actually, so we'll close after your reply. I think Penn State's decision to get rid of James Franklin ramps up the pressure on North Carolina to or get off the pot, right? I think Curt Cignetti, not doing it in 1 year, but better the second, when nobody had any idea. His press conference probably was a scroll for about an hour on ESPN. The fact that he was hired. And he might have the best team in the country. They have the two best wins. Nobody has two better wins than 63-10 over Illinois, and they clobbered Oregon the other day. If the pick six doesn't happen, it's 30-13. And he's at a place that has a lot less natural resources and inherent things going for it than North Carolina has. So those two things don't help the situation right now. And I know, because I've talked to some people about Cignetti, haven't talked to any of those same people about Franklin yet. But Penn State got rid of a guy who had 34 wins the last 3 seasons and almost played in the title game. If you're going to be a big boy and you're going to shell out cash to be a big boy, you got to make big boy decisions. You watch, Indiana's paying Cignetti $9 million a year. If Indiana wants to keep him and Ohio and Penn State goes for him, they're going to give him more. They're going to tear that contract up and give him a new one if they want to be a big boy. And I think that they do, because Big Ten's got a lot of cash coming to them if that private equity thing actually takes shape. So North Carolina is also in a position right now to determine exactly what it wants to be. You already took a giant step forward before Belichick by committing to invest the way that they have. Then you bring in Belichick and you add more money to the pot so you can pay him, you can pay Lombardi, et cetera. Now, if you have to go in another direction, do you go back and retreat to MAC money, or do you maintain where you are and move forward? If you do that, you have to then look at the investment. Yeah, I said this on a radio show earlier today, and I know I'm going super long-winded on this thing, so you can comment here in a second. Someone said, well, they can't afford to fire him. I said, well, can they afford not to fire him? We walk around the stadium several days a week. We go there for press conferences. There's all kinds of pizza for sale, and Modelo, they love Modelo there. They're pushing that like crazy, White Claw, all that stuff. They make a ton of money selling that crap on Saturdays. If you've only got 20,000 people in the stands, you're not going to sell much of that. If people don't buy tickets next year and don't show up next year, and you don't make that extracurricular money next year, then you have to look at it as a financial decision too. So it's a lot of stuff I just wrapped up there, but your thoughts?
On the Cignetti thing, I think really coming into the season, the outlook for the year was, look, it's either Bill Belichick and this North Carolina team has an Indiana-type turnaround in one season, or at the very opposite end of the spectrum, they are Florida State from last year, right? Like, those are the two opposite sides of the spectrum. I think we know close to where North Carolina's falling right now, but they had that opportunity. It's crazy to me, as well as it is to you, to think about James Franklin was a game away from playing for a national championship last year. And then going into the season and the offseason, they were picked by what many people picked them and Clemson to be among the top favorites to play for the college football national championship. A lot of people picked Penn State to be the national champions. And what? They lose 3 games and their head coach is gone. Like, it's a crazy dynamic. And I think that does, in fact, put a lot of pressure on this program, on Bill Belichick, to see what Cignetti's doing, to see the situation play out with James Franklin. And the last thing I'll sort of throw out there is this whole rebuilding idea, right? Like, Michael Lombardi has said on numerous occasions that this is a rebuild. He said it, right? Like, he's not shying away from it. He's used the word rebuild. And then we talk to players, right? You talk to Jordan Shipp after the last game against Clemson, and he says this is not a rebuild. We talked to Andrew Simpson today, who I thought gave a great answer of, while the rebuild thing is one thing, even if you're in a rebuild, you can win games. That's what Andrew Simpson said, which I thought was the most mature answer we've gotten out of Michael Lombardi, out of Bill Belichick, or out of any other player. Came from Andrew Simpson, was the most mature answer. And I asked Bill Belichick today, I think it was the 3rd or 4th question, right after you. I said, is this a rebuild? What is your vision of this program? I wanted to get him to admit that, okay, yes, I agree with Michael Lombardi. I agree with my general manager, which why are we struggling getting him to agree with his general manager being on the same page here? Yeah. He wouldn't say that. He has never said the word rebuild to us. He won't admit it. And so
I asked him after Clemson, Noah. I asked him that after Clemson. I said, how much of a rebuild is this? And is it a bigger rebuild than you anticipated? Man, he couldn't have gone away in a different direction faster than he did. That's right. That's the messaging. That's the lack of in sync. I was on another show the other day. I think it was when it was on the CBS pregame show on the CBS Sports Network, not the actual CBS. And they asked me, like, what's the biggest issue? And I said, from day one, lack of organization. And from lack of organization comes poor messaging, disjointed messaging. You see it in how the player personnel stuff. You see it in preparation. You see it in lack of adjustments. And then you see it in the messaging and how they don't even realize what a bad look it is to say, well, the Patriots aren't allowed here, little things like that. Just such terrible organization for a college product. And you're talking about that right now. The fact that the head coach and the GM, who are tied to the hip, cannot echo the same thoughts about something I think needs to be pushed the most right now more than anything. If this is a rebuild, tell the world it's a rebuild. Play your freshmen. Don't play 6 guys with no eligibility every offensive snap against Clemson like they did. Get on the same page, but they're not. So this is an ongoing story. We're going to be on it all over the place. I know that sometimes people think it's a little too negative, but we have to be completely open and honest with everybody. We're there in the trenches, and it's not a pretty sight. It's not a pretty situation, but I know I can speak for you, and I speak for our staff. We are willing to give them the opportunity and benefit of the doubt. You got 7 games. That's an eternity. 7 games is an eternity. There are some winnable games in there for any team that should be average. An average football team should win some games moving forward. Can they at least elevate to average, which, by the way, would be below what the expectations were coming in? Bill Belichick should never be average in this space, but they are way below it. Can they be average moving forward? If they are, then maybe a lot of these different storylines will either be squashed for good or they'll just hibernate for a long time. Either way, getting that stuff out of the discourse is important. And I think they did a little of that today, but not a ton. They at least didn't make it worse in that sense.
Getting to average would be a big improvement for them. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I mean, genuinely, if they can get to average and they can start winning games, if they can play 500 football from here on out, the season will be, by a lot of fans, categorized as like, okay, there's hope, right? Like there's a lot going into next season. We played 500 ball in the ACC. Forget the schedule thing. We understand that the schedule this year is much easier. It's a football game. You got to go out and win them. Next year, I beg North Carolina fans, don't look at the schedule next year. Look at the schedule for this year and focus on the rest of the games.
You don't want to look at next year's.
You don't want to look at next year's schedule. You got to get better this year to prove to have a remote shot next year. We'll just say that.
In fairness, Wake is a lot better than we thought. Virginia's a lot better than we thought. Yeah. Duke is proving to be – Duke might be the second best team in the ACC. And going to Raleigh is going to be difficult regardless. And quite frankly, a Friday night in California, we know what the records are when teams go from one coast to the other coast. Doesn't usually work out too well, as James Franklin found out a couple of weeks ago. So anyway, this is one of the longest daily drops of all time, longest pod you and I have done. We're going to do a lot more of this moving forward. Let us know what your thoughts are about the press conference. If your thoughts about him not refuting anything other than that one thing, or doesn't matter anymore. You just want to see football, want to try to win football games, and then see where this thing is at the end of November, which is kind of what I would rather do. I would rather spend the next 7 weeks just focusing on football, and then we can sit down and sort of unwrap all the stuff that's right there. That's what I would prefer to do. We'll see if that happens. He's Noah. I'm AJ. Don't forget, if you're still with us right now, 60% off until midnight Monday for a 1-year subscription. If you had that, you would have had a ton of accurate information. We didn't put out a lot of stuff that was put out. You would know exactly what we had out there. You can sign up now and go back and read it and read the whole thread because there's a ton of stuff and a crap load of commentary. We have a massive site, a lot of fans commenting. Not all of them have the same thoughts, which makes it very, very interesting. Again, he's Noah. I'm AJ. Thanks for stopping by.